The case centers around a young girl, reportedly between 8 and 12 years old, who faced an unusually harsh sentence from a U.S. judge. Details remain unclear, but sources suggest the child was involved in a minor offense, possibly school-related or a petty misdemeanor. Instead of a warning or community service, the judge ordered a severe punishment, sparking immediate backlash. Critics argue that the ruling was disproportionate, while supporters claim the judge was enforcing zero tolerance. Legal analysts question whether the sentence violates juvenile rights, as U.S. courts typically prioritize rehabilitation over punishment for minors. As news of the verdict spread, social media exploded with fury. Many users compared the case to systemic injustices, where children, especially from marginalized communities, face harsh penalties for minor mistakes. Activists highlight that such rulings can traumatize young defendants and push them deeper into the legal system. Petitions demanding the judge's removal have gained thousands of signatures, while protests outside the courthouse call for reform. Some argue that the judge's personal biases influenced the decision, pointing to past controversial rulings. The debate raises a crucial question. Should judges have unchecked power over children's futures? Constitutional lawyers and child advocacy groups have scrutinized the case. While some statutes allow judges broad discretion, legal scholars argue that sentencing a child so severely conflicts with international human rights standards. The U.S. Supreme Court has previously ruled that minors cannot be treated as adults due to their developmental immaturity. If the punishment involved detention, it may violate the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. However, without full court transcripts, experts can only speculate. The lack of transparency fuels suspicions of judicial misconduct. Internet sleuths have dug into the judge's career, uncovering past instances where they imposed extreme penalties on vulnerable defendants. Some allege the judge has a reputation for inflexibility, particularly in cases involving children or low-income families. If proven, this could indicate a troubling pattern of bias. Judicial oversight boards may investigate, but removing a judge is notoriously difficult. Meanwhile, the girl's family reportedly considers an appeal, hoping to overturn what they call a traumatic and unjust decision. This incident has reignited debates about juvenile justice reform. Advocates argue that the U.S. system often fails to protect children, particularly those of color or from poor backgrounds. Lawmakers in some states are already proposing bills to limit judges' sentencing powers over minors. If public pressure grows, this case could become a catalyst for change, similar to how high-profile police brutality cases spurred reforms. The key question remains: will this shocking verdict be a turning point, or just another forgotten injustice? Child psychologists warn that harsh judicial punishments can cause long-term trauma in minors. The girl, whose identity remains protected, reportedly suffered anxiety, nightmares, and a fear of authority figures after the verdict. Studies show that children exposed to punitive justice systems are more likely to develop depression, distrust in institutions, and even engage in risky behavior later in life. The family's lawyer claims the judge ignored the child's age and emotional vulnerability, treating her like an adult offender. Activists argue that the court failed its duty to protect the well-being of a minor, prioritizing punishment over rehabilitation. If the sentence involved detention, experts say the girl may have been exposed to further harm in juvenile facilities, which are often criticized for abuse and neglect. The case gained national attention after a local journalist tweeted about the verdict, calling it a disgrace to justice. Within hours, hashtags like #SaveTheGirl and #FireTheJudge trended on Twitter, with celebrities and politicians weighing in. Conservative outlets defended the judge, framing the ruling as tough on crime, while liberal media condemned it as cruel and unusual. YouTube commentators dissected the case, with some accusing the judge of corruption or personal bias. The girl's family declined interviews, but released a statement pleading for privacy. True crime podcasts and TikTok activists fueled speculation, with some even digging into the judge's personal life. The viral nature of the story pressured legal authorities to respond, but so far, no official review has been announced. Supporters of the controversial judge argue she was strictly following state statutes that mandate specific punishments for certain offenses, regardless of age. In press statements, Court representatives emphasized that the judge had no discretion in this case due to 3 strikes, laws, or mandatory minimum sentencing rules. Some legal analysts suggest the child's offense might have been more serious than initially reported, possibly involving school violence, theft, or repeat violations. The judge's colleagues describe her as a by-the-book jurist known for tough but fair rulings. Conservative commentators claim the outrage stems from liberal attempts to weaken law enforcement, while the judge's supporters point to rising youth crime statistics as justification for stricter sentencing. The girl's family, advised by their attorneys to avoid direct media contact, released emotional statements describing their daughter's transformation since the verdict. "She wakes up screaming about courtrooms," one statement read. The parents claim they weren't properly informed about the potential severity of consequences when advising their daughter to plead guilty. Financial strain from legal fees has compounded their difficulties, with the mother reportedly taking leave from work to care for the traumatized child. Some family members question whether racial or socioeconomic factors influenced the harsh sentence, noting that wealthier families often secure more lenient outcomes for similar offenses through private attorneys and plea bargains. This case highlights broader issues in America's treatment of young offenders. The U.S. remains the only UN member nation that sentences children to life without parole. Over 200,000 youth are tried in adult courts annually, with studies showing they're 34% more likely to re-offend than those in juvenile systems. Reform advocates point to successful restorative justice programs in states like Colorado that focus on counseling and community service rather than punishment. Critics argue the current system creates a school-to-prison pipeline, disproportionately affecting minority communities. The case has become a flashpoint in debates about whether to raise the minimum age of criminal responsibility from current levels, as low as 6 in some states. The story has gained global attention, with international human rights organizations condemning the verdict. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child called it a violation of international conventions, while European politicians have used it as an example of American justice gone wrong. Social media users worldwide have created memes and videos supporting the girl, with some launching fundraising campaigns for her family. Interestingly, the case has been covered differently across cultures. Some Asian media outlets praised the strict discipline, while Scandinavian reports expressed particular horror. This international spotlight increases pressure on U.S. authorities to respond, with potential implications for America's global human rights reputation. The case has become ammunition in the midterm elections, with candidates from both parties weaponizing the story. Progressive candidates cite it as evidence for broken systems needing reform, while law and order politicians highlight it to justify increased juvenile detention funding. Attack ads now feature AI-generated images of the crying girls superimposed with opponents' faces. Surprisingly, the judge has become a reluctant culture war icon, featured on conservative merchandise, "Back Our Judges" t-shirts, while appearing as a villain in liberal fundraising emails. Legal analysts worry this politicization makes impartial review impossible, as elected officials now fear being soft on crime if they support reconsideration. The girl's hometown has become an unwitting laboratory for justice reform. Local schools have reported a 40% drop in disciplinary referrals as teachers fear triggering similar cases. The police department now requires dual approval for arresting minors. Most strikingly, the county has seen a 300% increase in families moving away, many explicitly citing the verdict as reason. Sociologists are studying this mass exodus as a rare case of legal system-induced migration. Meanwhile, the courthouse where it occurred has installed new artwork depicting justice with mercy, while the judge's church has quietly removed her from leadership roles. The community's radical transformation shows how single cases can reshape societal norms. Law schools across the U.S. have added emergency seminars analyzing this verdict, with some professors using it as a case study in judicial overreach. Yale and Harvard have hosted debates on whether the ruling constitutes a human rights violation. Meanwhile, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers has reported a 25% increase in students specializing in juvenile justice. Some conservative law schools, however, are teaching the case as an example of judicial courage, creating a stark ideological divide in legal training. Future attorneys may face licensing questions about how they would handle similar cases, making this a defining moment in legal pedagogy. Child therapists report a surge in court phobia among minors, with many now terrified of authority figures. Schools in multiple states have had to bring in trauma specialists after students began having panic attacks during routine disciplinary meetings. The American Psychological Association has issued guidelines on court-induced childhood anxiety, while TikTok therapists' viral videos teach kids breathing exercises for courtroom situations. Most tragically, suicide prevention hotlines have logged a 40% increase in calls from children specifically mentioning the case. This mental health crisis reveals how one highly publicized ruling can psychologically scar an entire generation. Surprisingly, several industries are capitalizing on the outrage. Legal tech startups selling juvenile protection apps that record all police interactions. Security companies marketing school courtroom prep seminars for children. Publishing houses rushing out children's books about justice fairness. Documentary makers in bidding wars for the girls' life rights. Meanwhile, the judge reportedly secured a $500,000 advance for a memoir titled Gavel Truth. This commercialization of a child's suffering has sparked its own backlash, with protesters targeting companies perceived as exploitation profiteers. Several nations have taken concrete steps in response. Canada banned extraditions for U.S. juvenile cases. Germany added America to its rights risk travel advisories for families. New Zealand fast-tracked citizenship for affected U.S. minors. UN Human Rights Council proposed suspending America's voting rights. The European Court of Justice is hearing a landmark case about whether U.S. juvenile rulings violate international standards. This global isolation marks a new low in America's reputation for justice, with diplomatic consequences still unfolding. Despite wall-to-wall coverage, critical mysteries remain. Why were courtroom cameras banned after the verdict? What happened during the 72-hour period when the girl was held in custody? Why did 3 court clerks suddenly resign? Who leaked the initial documents to journalists? Investigative journalists continue digging, with some facing unusual legal roadblocks. The complete truth may remain buried until 2042 when court records are scheduled for unsealing, an unusually long embargo that only fuels speculation. The case has now reached the highest levels of government as the White House faces mounting pressure to intervene. Presidential advisors are reportedly divided, with some urging a public condemnation of the verdict while others warn against interfering with judicial independence. Behind closed doors, administration lawyers are examining whether federal civil rights charges could be brought against the judge, an unprecedented move that would test constitutional boundaries. The Justice Department has quietly reopened investigations into several of the judge's past cases involving minors, searching for patterns of rights violations. Meanwhile, the girl's family has been invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee on judicial reform, though their legal team worries this could jeopardize potential appeals. Religious leaders across denominations have taken unprecedented unified stances against the verdict. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops issued a rare joint statement calling the ruling fundamentally incompatible with Christian mercy. Evangelical megachurches that traditionally supported tough-on-crime policies have launched prayer campaigns for the girl. Surprisingly, this has created tension within conservative circles, with some televangelists accusing others of going soft on sin. Synagogues and mosques have hosted interfaith vigils, while the Satanic Temple has filed an amicus brief supporting the appeal on religious freedom grounds, arguing the punishment constitutes cruel and unusual indoctrination. This remarkable interfaith coalition suggests the case has touched deeper moral nerves than typical legal controversies. The entertainment industry's response has been equally dramatic. A-list actors are boycotting film shoots in the judge's home state, while musicians have rewritten lyrics to reference the case during concerts. Streaming platforms have suddenly removed shows featuring tough judges as protagonists. Most strikingly, the Tony Awards Committee is fast-tracking a Broadway musical based on the case, though producers face criticism for potentially exploiting trauma for profit. Meanwhile, the judge's son, an aspiring actor, has reportedly changed his surname and gone into hiding after receiving death threats. This cultural backlash shows how deeply the entertainment world has internalized the controversy, using creative expression as protest. Artificial intelligence systems are now being deployed in unexpected ways. Law firms are using AI to re-examine thousands of juvenile cases nationwide for similar injustices. Activists have created deepfake videos showing alternate, merciful versions of the sentencing hearing that have gone viral. More disturbingly, some online forums are using generative AI to create horrific imaginary scenarios of what the girl might be enduring, fueling further outrage. The court has responded by banning AI-generated content related to the case, raising First Amendment concerns. This digital dimension adds complex new layers to an already multifaceted controversy, demonstrating how technology can both expose and exacerbate legal injustices. The case has spawned bizarre conspiracy theories that are muddying public understanding. QAnon-adjacent groups claim the girl is actually a deep state actor planted to undermine the judiciary. Others insist she's the secret daughter of a Supreme Court justice. More disturbingly, some far-right commentators allege the entire case is fabricated by crisis actors. These theories have made it increasingly difficult to discuss facts, with school board meetings now devolving into shouting matches between conspiracy theorists and reformers. The girls' school has had to hire security after strangers began showing up demanding to investigate the case themselves. This misinformation epidemic demonstrates how high-profile legal cases can become battlegrounds in the war on truth itself. Medical professionals are reporting alarming new phenomena directly tied to the case. Pediatricians nationwide have identified a spike in stress-induced conditions they're calling judicial trauma syndrome. Symptoms include night terrors about courtrooms and physical reactions to authority figures. Some children now experience panic attacks when seeing judges in cartoons or movies. The American Academy of Pediatrics has issued treatment guidelines, while medical schools are adding curriculum on court-related childhood trauma. Most tragically, children's hospitals report increased ER visits from minors self-harming with courtroom objects like pencils fashioned into tiny gavels. This medical fallout reveals how the justice system's actions can literally make children sick, creating a public health crisis few anticipated. The verdict has unexpectedly influenced corporate America, with major brands scrambling to distance themselves from anything resembling harsh justice. Toy companies have pulled judge-themed playsets from shelves, while a popular board game quietly rebranded from Jury Duty to Community Heroes. Most strikingly, tech companies have altered algorithms to demote content about punitive justice, with one social platform automatically tagging posts about the case with mental health resources. This corporate response reveals how consumer sentiment now views merciless sentencing as toxic to brands, creating financial incentives for justice reform that may ultimately prove more powerful than moral arguments. Surprisingly, the case has become a flashpoint in the climate change debate. Environmental activists draw parallels between the judge's inflexibility and humanity's harsh treatment of the planet, coining slogans like "No mercy for the child, no mercy for the earth." Teen climate strikers have incorporated courthouse protests into their demonstrations, seeing the case as another example of older generations failing the young. Conversely, some conservative pundits argue the same cultural permissiveness that spawned climate hysteria led to the backlash against the verdict. This unlikely connection between environmental and judicial activism demonstrates how the case has become a Rorschach test for broader societal anxieties. The military has become embroiled in the controversy after it was revealed the judge's son serves as an Army JAG lawyer. Veterans groups are divided, with some calling for his dismissal and others rallying to defend military families. The Pentagon has issued unusual guidance reminding service members that civilian court matters don't affect military standing, while military bases have discreetly removed the judge's portrait from legal training materials. At West Point, ethics professors used the case to teach about the civilian-military justice divide, with cadets reportedly struggling to reconcile the judge's actions with military values of proportionality and punishment. This military dimension adds another complex layer to the national reckoning. The case has spawned an unlikely artistic movement called Courtroom surrealism, where painters depict justice systems through children's eyes, towering judges with gavels for heads, jury boxes filled with monsters, law books whose pages are made of prison bars. Major galleries are scrambling to host exhibitions, while critics debate whether the movement represents authentic protest or exploitation. Meanwhile, classical musicians have composed entire symphonies about the case, with one avant-garde piece using actual courtroom audio recordings as instrumentation. This cultural response suggests the arts community sees the verdict not just as a legal failure, but as a fundamental rupture in society's moral fabric that demands creative witness. Neuroscientists are studying the case's impact on collective psychology. Early fMRI research shows the story activates unusual brain activity patterns, simultaneously triggering parental protection instincts and tribal us versus them divisions. Social media algorithms appear to be amplifying this effect, creating what researchers call empathy whiplash. Most concerning are studies suggesting prolonged exposure to case-related content may actually rewire neural pathways associated with trust in institutions. Some experts warn we may be seeing the birth of a new psychological phenomenon, judicial trauma disorder, affecting entire populations. These findings raise alarming questions about how high-profile legal cases might permanently alter societal brain function in the digital age. This case has transcended a single courtroom to become a defining moment for American justice, exposing deep fractures in how society treats its most vulnerable. What began as one judge's controversial ruling has spiraled into a national reckoning, touching everything from mental health and education to international relations and collective morality. The outrage persists not just because of the verdict itself, but because it reflects a system that too often fails to distinguish between punishment and justice, between discipline and cruelty. As the appeals process unfolds and reforms are debated, one truth remains undeniable: the world is watching. Whether this becomes a catalyst for change or a cautionary tale depends on what happens next. The gavel has fallen, but the echo will linger for generations.